Well, Big Brother 26 continues to impress us with easily its most shocking and unpredictable week yet. Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is my review for this week of Big Brother 26, episodes 19 through 21, and holy shit. I mean, this is another week where, and I said this, like, the last time we discussed this, I said this last week, that yes, things were kind of shifting a bit, and maybe things weren't going, but eventually it was going to ramp back up. I did not anticipate it to ramp back up in the way that it did, because my god, this week was absolutely insane. There is so much to talk about, and generally feels like this is the defining week for the season. I do think the week that set the tone for this season was week 3. Even week 1, honestly, but week 3 really is what made us realize, okay, this season's gonna be something special. But this week in particular is just so wild and and just so unpredictable, and it truly feels like we are headed into uncharted territory when it comes to Big Brother. There is a way that we have looked at this show for seasons upon seasons, especially in the modern era. There was a direction it seemed like things were heading, and now we're going all the way back, and it feels like we are kind of starting from scratch by the end of this. And of course, I'm going to get into all of that, but either way, really excited to talk about this week. But let's just go ahead, stop being around the bush, and just get right into it, because holy shit, there's a lot to discuss here. Alright, so let's just go ahead and start talking about Sunday's episode, which I will be honest, there was stuff that I enjoyed about this episode overall, but I wasn't the most impressed by this episode. I honestly was kind of underwhelmed by how a lot of this episode was done. I wasn't really fond of the way that certain things were edited, and just in general, this just wasn't my favorite episode. I still enjoyed it. I still did enjoy it. This is not the, recap episode that we got, or the season premiere. This is not those episodes. This was still an episode I did enjoy. I just feel like the way things were edited definitely was not my favorites, and I think there's a big reason as to why, which I'll get into. But let's just go ahead and jump into Sundays here. So there are a couple things to talk about before we do talk, of course, about the HOH. Basically, the main thing to really discuss here is, honestly, a big character in this episode. We talk a lot about, really, I think, kind of the star of this week, and that, of course, is Chelsie, who is so thrilled that she has won the AI arena and that she is now safe, and she is now in this place where she just wants to do what she can to try to regain control. But really, a lot of the focus of this episode, surprisingly, goes to Cam, who I've said before, I've been very disappointed. I've been very disappointed by. I haven't found him to be a very compelling house guest to watch, and I just find him to be very dull. It seems like he's kind of checked out. It seems like he doesn't really put much effort in. That changes this week. The Cam we see this week is generally a completely different person than we have seen throughout the rest of this season. He is far more active. He is much more willing to, tell people how he's feeling. He seems to have developed a much better social game, and I'm honestly really here for it, because I like Cam. I've always found him to be, someone I want to root for. I've just had a really hard time doing so, because he's kind of not really given much of anything in terms of entertainment, but this week, I will give him the credit. He definitely did, and this episode, he kind of talks about how he has a conversation with Tucker early on, and Tucker lets him know that, yeah, he absolutely would have gone over Chelsie. That was definitely the plan. And, while he understands it, he's realizing that he's got to try to turn things around. He can't keep ending up in this position where he's going on the block and, he is at risk of leaving and people aren't really, taking him seriously. People don't really want to work with him. He needs to do what he can to try to turn his game around. And I do think he is successful in doing so. He has this conversation with Chelsie, who at this point, understandably, these two are basically each other's closest allies. They trust each other the most. And basically, they concoct this plan where, he wants to figure out who was the driving force behind sending him home, and he wants to do what he can to try to take them out. Chelsea's kind of still unsure where she stands, but she feels like, whoever wins HOH, they can kind of go from there. So it really did seem like things were maybe going to turn around for Cam, and that he was going to be able to turn things around here, and that's something that I just really like seeing, because like I said, I like just how, again, I've said it before, just how fluid this season is. You can have someone on 1 week who seems like they are in this terrible position, and it just seems like they are not going to, they're going to stay there, and they're not going to improve, and they're going to end up falling behind the game. And then the next week, they suddenly end up in a much more powerful spot, and that's exactly the case with Cam this week. I think he does some really good work this week that I generally think could get him significantly further in this game than I honestly suspected he was going to. So I was really impressed by him this week. But the other person to talk about in this episode who gets a lot of airtime is Leah, someone else that really has not been in the show that much. We get to see a lot more of her. She is kind of upset that she had to vote out Brooklyn because she really didn't want to, and there's this moment where like Quinn is going to console her about it, and she feels like that she's kind of in the out. She doesn't really have much control of this game, so it's kind of setting up that maybe she's also going to exert more control. I wouldn't really say that, although Leah is doing a good job of having a lot of people just wanting to protect her because I think that she is, playing a really strong social game in that way. Yeah, so that's someone else that we do focus on. Then really the only other thing to talk about before we get to the HOH comp is with Rubina, who is talking to T-Core about how she really wishes that, like, she could have thrown Brooklyn some kind of sympathy votes, and she's really unsure why she only, like, pulled her and Kimo aside, because her and Brooklyn used to have like a deal of sorts, and Rubina feels that she doesn't think that she would have gotten to her and that it wouldn't have really worked out. And so, again, I think this is really showing just how much of a duo these two are becoming. They're really being seen as like one entity in that way, and I think that was very interesting scene overall. But we jump pretty quickly into the HOH comp, and again, it was basically another trivia comp. Well, it wasn't exactly trivia. This one was a little bit more creative, which I actually really liked. Basically, it was... they had to watch clips of the house guests, but only, like, doing activities, like either they were, brushing their teeth, or maybe they were holding something, or they were eating something, and it was, like, weird close-up of that. They were all these sound bites, and they had to try to answer questions, and again, I really like this comp. I think this is another comp that they really did a good job of, trying to find something that is equitable for everybody. I like seeing that we have had so many more, like, trivia comps and stuff like that this season. I feel like those are the comps that they do put the most they always seem to have an emphasis on, like, physical comps, and they put way too much effort into it, but this season they're putting so much more effort into, like, trivia comps and stuff like that, and like more like strategic stuff, and it's just really great to see. I like seeing how much Big Brother is really trying to double down on that and making a significant effort. I know I've said this every week, but this is another really good example of that. Ultimately, though, the comp does come down to T-Core. The comp does come down to Chelsie, Joseph, Rubina, and T-Core, which, I was really here for any of these four winning, but ultimately, T-Core is the HOH of the season, and I was just so excited to see that was the case, because T-Core is someone I've really enjoyed watching on this show. I've really enjoyed her journey of being someone that, like, really wants to speak up, but like kind of has a hard time in doing so, but also has this like really strong social game behind her. I was really excited to see her finally get to wield power, maybe finally make a definitive decision, put herself in a better spot. I feel like this was like the perfect win for T-Core, but also I was really nervous because considering that she is someone that had so many deals with everybody and everyone was feeling great with her, I didn't really know how this was going to go, but either way, I was still really excited for her and definitely was very interested to see how this week was ultimately going to play out, although I could not have ever anticipated the way it really ended up going. So as usual, I'm going to start off here talking about T-Core's plans for the HOH, but I think before I do that, I gotta talk about just the reactions to T-Core winning. Truly unlike anything I have seen before. I mean, these people were just, like, look, we see people that are excited, and we see, you know, the classic scene of them, like, dancing in a room, like, excited that the other person won on their alliance. Like, that's normal. That's what we expect in Big Brother. And then you have the other side that is all, like, pissed off and annoyed, but the difference here, when T-Core wins, generally, everybody is over the moon. Like, they're acting like she's already won this game, like she did something, like she had this amazing accomplishment in her life, that she is someone that, like, you know, she had this huge, like, personal win that, like, you know, she's so brave for doing it and things like that. It was just, I've never seen anything like it, to the point where they are following her from room to room. They are just praising her up and down. I mean, it was insane to watch. Nobody, though, was as excited as Rubina, Kimo, and Tucker, who were practically, like, bawling at the, like, sobbing at the fact that, like, she ended up, winning HOH. Rubina especially, it was really funny the way they ended up editing this. And look, I mean, this is a testament to T-Core, I think, not just as a social player, but as a person. The thing is, T-Core has always just been this really sweet person that has always tried to, you know, see the good in everybody, has been there for everybody when they're going through hard times, has had really good conversations with everyone. This is the perfect sign of someone who has such a strong social game and is in this really great spot. But it also is very worrying considering that literally everybody loves her, but unfortunately she's got to make nominations and she's got to put people up. And you know, I was really unsure how this was going to go for her, but it was really just crazy to see how this all played out. I don't think like I said, I've never seen an HOH have this amount of, like, worship when they end up winning. Like, maybe throughout the game I do, but not when they win, acting like they, like, won the game or something. I mean, Rubina was acting like this was, like, T-Core's acceptance letter into college. Like, that's how excited Rubina was for her here. I mean, I thought this was just such a fun moment. I love the way that I love the way they ended up editing this, and, again, I thought that this was just really fun to watch. But talking about her HOH in a more specifics, basically she wants to kind of use this week as a way to not blow up her spot. She wants to, you know, put the right people in positions, but she wants to really try to talk to everyone. She tries to get these one-on-ones done as quickly as possible because she generally is struggling with what she wants to do and who she wants to put up. So obviously her main input is going to be from Rubina and Kimo, who, can I just say, I think we really see this week how great of a decision it was that Kimo and T-Core kept Rubina, because she is, like, forever loyal to them now. She's basically become their third, and it's kind of crazy because they had the visionaries with Quinn, but because of all, like, I think just the crazy shit that Quinn has done, they've basically put Rubina in his spot, and I think it's a huge improvement because Rubina is so much more loyal. She's always looking out for their best interest. Now, I will say, game-wise, she's not that great. Like, there's definitely things about Rubina game-wise that are really questionable in terms of how she's playing the game. But, again, I think just the loyalty that she has and the way that she's able to always look out for both of their best interests, it really is just a testament to how good of a move it was that they ended up keeping her on that week that they did, because they almost, you know, let her go, and it would have been disaster, and especially considering this moment, T-Core, it is so much better that she has Rubina here than if she didn't, because I feel like she is just feeling so much more comfortable throughout this week as a result, and she really is trying to value their input. One of the things that they do talk about is the fact that they have 6th Avenue, but they're not really sure how to feel about it. And this was something that I was kind of thinking that, okay, 6th Avenue is maybe just going to run the rest of this game. They're this really strong alliance of sorts, and it turns out, again, just like most of the alliances this season, not really, because 6th Avenue is almost immediately kind of like seen as, well, we don't really want this to happen. We don't really like this alliance. They like Tucker, but Joseph and Angela, they really don't want in the alliance at all. They especially did not really want Angela there. They don't really trust Joseph, and so they kind of want to veer off from that. They make this 4 with Tucker, which it should be noted, this whole conversation was happening when they were trying to get Tucker to vouch for, to kind of get on board with the idea of saving Chelsie, which he wasn't going to do. But they made this alliance during this conversation. They have this 4. They decide to call it, really, I think, the worst alliance name we have heard all season, and that is Friends with 4 Z's. Some people call it Frenzies, some people call it Friends, and yeah, I mean, I can't believe that this was actually a real thing. I can't believe this is the alliance name they came up with. I like this 4, I do, but there was nowhere, there was no part of me that thought this is actually going to be a thing, and that this is actually going to go somewhere, but they definitely made it seem like it was going to be. And I do think that if this alliance was called literally anything else, I would have had a lot more faith in them than if it wasn't. But anyway, she makes this alliance, which is really good for her. It seems like the 4 of them, they've all worked well together throughout this game. They've all had each other's backs. So it seems like that's going to be where she ends up going this week, right? She has this, 4 with Tucker. She's going to make sure that the 4 of them are kind of controlling what happens, and it seems like that's going to be the case, and yeah, no, that's not really how things end up playing out, because she does then get to her one-on-ones with everybody, and basically, I'm going to go through them as quickly as possible. Her and Chelsie have this really good discussion about wanting to protect her, which, can I just say, the fact that she's now saved Chelsie, I think has done wonders for T-Core's game, because Chelsie is somebody that she now has as a number. Regardless of if Chelsie values her or not, I think that it was really good that T-Core kept Chelsie off the block this week, because if Chelsie does end up in power, I think she's definitely going to remember that, and I think we definitely do see that here. There were multiple opportunities for T-Core to target Chelsie this week, and she makes sure that, she doesn't, because she has such a good relationship with her, and she really wants to, work farther with her. She talks to Makensy a little bit, who kind of brings up the idea of Angela and Quinn, which really only heightens her wanting to put her up, because she has the visionaries with Quinn, and then Angela's in 6th Avenue, and she really doesn't want to go for either of them, so it really just makes her think that, yeah, MJ's probably going to be a nominee here, so that really doesn't end up going all that well. She talks to Leah, who doesn't really give her much of anything, an answer of who she put up, which is not really the case. I'll talk about that in the What We Didn't See, but did not really edit this segment properly. And then Cam's also, they didn't really edit properly either, but he kind of discusses how, everyone is a target for some reason, how everyone's targeting him, and he doesn't really know what direction to go. So it seems like she kind of has her mind made up in MJ and Cam. That's kind of where she wants to steer things. But then in comes Tucker, and Tucker has a bit of a, a bit of a pitch for her. And look, I get that Tucker is someone that, wants to be, really loyal, wants to show that he has everyone's back, wants to do what's in everyone's best interests, but if Tucker had gone to T-Core here and pitched the idea of, let's say, not Chelsie, he does bring up it brings up the idea of not targeting Chelsie, but targeting I don't know, someone like a Quinn, someone like an MJ. I think this actually could have gone really well for him. But instead of that, he pitches to T-Core that if she is struggling with who to put up, that he is okay with being a pawn. I want you to remember that. Like, literally a few scenes ago, we saw him establish this alliance with T-Core, that he has her back, that they want to go the distance, and now he's telling her that, yeah, you can put me up as a pawn, that's gonna be fine. And yeah, I mean, look, I've seen a lot of people heavily debate whether or not T-Core should have gone with this, and yes, obviously, maybe she could have backpedaled, maybe she could have done something different, but I'm going to say the same thing I did with Cedric that I'm going to say with Tucker. Once you put this idea into somebody's head, it is very hard for them to let go of it. It is very hard for them to suddenly consider other options because, well, they now have a spot that they don't even have to think about because you volunteered for it. So, again, it's so frustrating me. I don't know why Tucker thought that this was a good idea, especially when he wants 6th Avenue to be a thing. He wants this Friends Alliance to be a thing. Putting yourself in the line of fire like this, knowing that, yes, I know he's on a hot streak right now, but obviously we'll talk about what happens. I just feel like at this point, this is the sign of someone who has just gotten way too confident in their positioning in the game that he just thinks he's going to be fine. He thinks he will go up on the block and he's going to be okay. Now, he even does mention to her that, like, if I pay the price for it, it's fine. But, like, I just don't understand why he even put this idea into her head. Like, I know that he has a rationale for it. I don't agree with it at all. I don't think that this is a good move. I think if you want to move forward with an alliance, you don't pawn yourself because basically you are showing that, like, you are someone that is willing to be, like, fed to the wolves, essentially. Like, that's what Tucker is doing. Like, hey, if you need a liability in your alliance and you need somebody to, you know, be thrown under the bus, I'm right here. Like, that's not the way to go about this. Like, if he had said to T-Core, like, I generally know that you're struggling, I want to try to help you as much as I can, like, let's try to, you know, come up with some options together, I think this actually could have been really good for him. But the second that he brought up that he wanted to be pawned, T-Core just could not let go of that. And there's another reason for that I'll talk about a little bit later, but it's so frustrating to me that he decided to go ahead and do this when I generally feel like Tucker was coming into this week in the best spot he's been this entire game, and the second he did this, it was just kind of just, it kind of was just signing his, it kind of did feel like this could be a huge, grave error for him. And yeah, I mean, we'll talk about what happens, obviously, but I was just in disbelief when he ultimately decided to do this. I couldn't believe that he actually went through and decided to volunteer. So this was just insane to me, the way this all played out. And then if that's not enough, we have another scene later of Angela coming into this conversation with, like, Rubina and Kimo and T-Core, and she's, like, crying to them, thinking that, like, she's going on the block, and they're trying to, like, reassure her that that's not going to be a possibility. Again, just really funny the way all of that turned out. So I thought that was a really funny moment, but ultimately we do get to the nominations here where T-Core does decide to ultimately put up MJ, and MJ, Cam, and Tucker because Tucker pawned himself. And yeah, do I think these were the best nominations for T-Core? Yeah, I kind of do. I think that MJ makes so much sense. They have not been aligned this entire game. She's still this huge wild card. She's still someone that we know can win comps when she needs to. I think Cam is someone who, obviously, yeah, him and T-Core had a bit of a relationship, but things have very much soured. If you're not going to put up Chelsie, I think you kind of have to put up Cam at that point, just because, like, that side, you know, is still not fully having your back, and I think that the way that she played it there was fine. And then when it comes to Tucker, yes, obviously, she could have left him on the block. I've seen many people discuss this, that just because he put the idea in her head does not mean that she needed to follow suit. But I feel like, again, it's just one of those things where, because of the fact that she was already struggling so much with 3 nominees especially, I give her a little bit more, I give her a little bit more grace for it. Because normally, yes, you shouldn't put up someone that you are aligned with, that you feel good with. I don't think generally that's usually a good idea, but when you have 3 nominees and the numbers are dwindling down in the way that they are, I think you kind of have to do something risky like that sometimes. And if someone, volunteers, you kind of just have to say yes. And I feel like that's been Tucker's problem this entire game, is that he's been willing to be at the mercy of people when he really never needed to be. And I think this was just like the first sign that things weren't really going to go well. But ultimately, those are her nominations, and that's kind of how things play out here. Now, aside from that, in this episode, there is quite a bit more to talk about. The big thing going on this week, of course, is the AI instigator. We knew what this was really going to be, but we didn't really know how it was going to play out. We didn't really know who was going to get it. I was convinced that it was Joseph. That just kind of made the most sense to me, considering that they really didn't promote it very well in the show, and I saw lots of people on Twitter wanted to vote for Joseph, thought that he'd be funny to, be the AI instigator. I thought too, because he can be a very sneaky player in that way, although these days I would say is a little bit more obvious with some things, which I'll talk about. The thing that I will give them credit for is that they played this so well on the feeds. They didn't tell us who the AI instigator was. The person that is the AI instigator themselves is not allowed to tell anyone as well, which is so great. I don't know why they did not put this same amount of effort into the deepfake and into the America's Veto. I really feel like they should have, especially the deepfake, the way that they were so adamant about the fact that, like, if you tell anyone, this gets stripped away. I think that would have been so good if they had done that. Instead, what they do is they don't even tell them that this is a power. They play these deepfake videos, and the way they did it on the feeds was this one moment of Rubina, where Rubina is basically, there's this moment with Quinn where he is outing that Tucker and Rubina are a thing. Rubina started crying emotionally. We didn't know what was going on, and at that point I was like, well, there's no way that this is Tucker. Like, there's no possible way that Tucker is throwing his showmance into the line of fire. There's no possible way that he is trying to put this target onto them. It can't possibly be Tucker. But then I heard people say, well, his reaction wasn't that strong. He didn't seem that mad about it. And that kind of made me think that maybe it's a possibility. And it turns out that it is, in fact, Tucker. And look, I mean, I feel like this was the obvious choice. I think everyone kind of suspected when this power was given out that Tucker was probably going to be the one to be given it. Everyone's been loving Tucker. He's been such a fun character this entire season. I feel like Tucker getting it definitely was the most obvious outcome of them all. But do I think he played this well? I don't know, because if I'm being honest, I don't really know how you play this well, and I think the position that Tucker was in really hindered him from being able to perform this in a way that was, exciting to watch, that made it, so it felt satisfying. I don't think from where he stood in the game that he was able to do that because of kind of, just the hand that he was dealt. Obviously, yes, he couldn't tell anybody about it, but speculation was going to happen, and he had to do what he can to try to help himself. I certainly don't think, though, this first time around he handled this very well at all, because we find out that basically his intention here was make it so Rubina and him didn't have to hide anything, kind of just open up about the fact that they are a showmance and let everybody in about it. First of all, why are you telling people, why are you giving, this deep fake of saying that you and Rubina are in a showmance? You realize that now increases the need for for people to want to target you, and also now target Rubina as well. Do you realize that that's basically what you're doing? You're giving them ammo when you could easily be backpedaling and trying to do what you can to steer clear of that entirely. Two, I don't understand why he decided to do it in this way with this deepfake. This does not have the result that he thought it was going to at all. Rubina is really upset. She doesn't understand why people would do this to them. Tucker's trying to console her. So yeah, he really does not handle this very well here at all. I get his intention, but I just don't think this was the way to really go about it, but it was a fun way to kick off the AI instigators, seeing everyone just being so confused over what was happening, wanting to get to the bottom of things, Quinn being framed for it, and him trying, him kind of trying to go along with the idea that it could be him, but obviously it's not him. I just thought that there was a lot, the way it was edited, I thought was definitely a lot of fun. Again, I just think, in my personal opinion, when it comes to the AI instigator, that I think really the only people that could have gotten it and done it successfully is someone like a Joseph, is somebody like a Leah. If MJ had this, I think we would have seen a lot more daring of these avatars, because what we ended up getting, it just didn't really satisfy in the way that we were hoping, and I think it really is because you can't really do something like this unless you are in a place where you truly nobody is going to suspect that it's you. You are playing such a quiet game with very few allies on your side, or you're playing a game where you're so faded into the background that nobody really is going to suspect that it's you. I think that's the way to really go about this, but I think Tucker was more focused on how can I do this to benefit my own game, and I just think in the position that he was in, he really wasn't able to do it very effectively. So yeah, this really did not end up going the way that he intended at all. Other than that, there was a lot of filler in this episode, and I really don't understand it. This was not at all a boring week. This was an incredibly eventful week, actually, and I just don't know why they had so much of this episode bogged down by useless filler. Like, I enjoyed the segments of Angela eating after being a have-not because it's Angela and it's fun to watch. Like, yes, after seeing her complain about not being able to eat the charcuterie, seeing her, like, eating a sandwich and just feeling so delighted about, like, it's the first time she's ever eaten, I thought was a really fun segment. Kimo singing, sure, but it felt like a TikTok edit to me. Like, I really did feel like they were trying to make this, like, a trend of sorts, and I don't know, I just thought it went on too long. I get it, he's singing, and that's funny, I guess, but it just didn't really do much of anything for me, and I think it was another thing that easily they could have just kind of cut away from this episode. I don't really think we needed that moment at all when it came to that. So yeah, I think that, again, this episode was definitely not the greatest. I think we did not spend enough time really on T-Core being HOH and the nominations she wants to make, and we focus a lot, like I said, on like Cam and Leah, which I thought was kind of a weird choice because, well, yes, Cam goes on the block, Leah, it doesn't even touch the block this week. I like that we saw them. I just don't understand why we saw so much of them in this episode. I like the conversation that, like, Cam and Chelsie have. I thought that was, like, a good moment. Overall, I just wasn't the hugest fan of the way some of this episode was handled. I think some of it just felt a little bit too abbreviated. It felt like they didn't really do a great job of, like, going super in-depth in the week, especially when we talk about how things actually played out in the what we didn't see of it all. Which, while we're on the subject of that, let's just jump right into it, because here's the thing. When it comes to the what we didn't see, I will say this right now. We are getting to a point in the season where, because there are fewer house guests, things are going to inevitably slow down and there aren't going to be as many things to talk about in this section. But that does not mean that I don't have a lot to discuss regardless, especially when it comes to Sunday, because it is generally very hard to even try to describe most of what went down, because for some reason the feeds all of Friday last week were down for about like 8 to 9 hours, and it was one of those things where this was not something that was prompted. This was not like them doing a comp. It was not the AI instigator. I saw a lot of people saying that that's what they thought it really was about. We really don't know what the reason was for this here, but I think we really can only suspect the worst, because this was all, prior to this was a conversation with Chelsie and T-Core where she was, like, bursting into tears over something, and we really don't know what it was about, but she was clearly very, very hurt by something that was said. Later on, there's a conversation with T-Core and Rubina where Rubina talks about how Chelsie was crying. T-Core said it was something about race, and then it just cut, and we don't know any of what's going on, and Look, I will say this right now. I am not going to try to make a definitive hypothesis of sorts of what really happened, nor am I going to try to blame somebody for it when I really don't have the evidence to suggest that that was the case. Like, yes, there are things that we could bring up. There are things that we could discuss here in terms of like who it is, try to narrow it down, try to figure out how this all happened. But the fact is, like, we just don't know enough. And I really do blame Big Brother for this, because with something like this, you cannot just give us a conversation like that and then just try to pretend it didn't happen, and then try to cut the feeds every single time. I discussed this in week 2. When they were doing this, all it does is make it seem so much worse than it actually was. I mean, there were talks of people thinking that Leah was getting removed because Tucker said that she had said like 4 derogatory terms and, jumped to the conclusion that Leah was the person behind all of this. I also heard people think that maybe somebody was quitting or there was some sort of fight going on. There were so many different theories out there, and the problem is, like, very little of it had any validity to it whatsoever, and when you don't tell us what's going on, this is exactly the result of it. All this misinformation just getting spread left and right, and it makes it so you are giving us a very inaccurate account of what really went down, and it also feels like you are trying to hide something, you are trying to shield things from us, and all it really does, again, is just make things so much worse. Let's say something did happen in this scenario. Let's say somebody was kicked out. Well, we have no idea as to what led up to it. We are completely in the dark as to how it happened, and just utterly stunned as to what went down, and obviously we want to hear answers, but again, the show doesn't want to give it to us, and it's just really frustrating, because again, what I could be talking about right now might have nothing to do with why the feeds were down, might have nothing to do with it whatsoever. I just think, though, it is really suspicious that we have this conversation, we cut from it immediately, and then basically feeds are down for most of the day. I just think that's kind of ridiculous. I don't understand why they decided to do this. I feel like it completely just defeats the purpose of having feeds in the first place if you're not going to let us see everything that's going down, if you're not going to give us that unbiased view of what really happened. This is the chance for us to see how things were, and not have to rely on the episodes. And then with this, like, they didn't even try to give us an idea what happened, so this wasn't even like week 2 where they finally showed in the episode. Here, it didn't end up playing a role in the week, so they felt, okay, I guess we don't need to show it, but you very much do, because these are important things to see. I think every conversation that happens on the feeds is important. I think especially something like this that is so sensitive, like race, you really do need to show everything that went down, and they just didn't want to do that, and it just was really frustrating. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to Sunday, there really is not that much to talk about, because truthfully, there was so much that we didn't see, and there was so much of this particular day leading up to the nominations that we just don't know enough about. But the things I can discuss, if I really had to definitively tell you things that I think they should have done a better job with covering, are really the pitches. The pitches that we saw that T-Core, in her one-on-ones, were not exactly the way the show portrayed them. With Leah in particular, yes, there was a long time when she was not saying a name, and she desperately wanted her to say a name. She just was telling her, like, just mention one person. And eventually, she threw out MJ. And she talked about how MJ is someone that's this really big threat. She's kind of this wild card. She doesn't know where she stands. She doesn't really think she has her best interest. And this is basically the reason why Leah did not end up going on the block. I think if Leah hadn't said anything, she probably sits on the block right next to MJ. Now, when it comes to Arena, there's a completely different reason why she wasn't on the block. But with this is probably why she did not touch the block, because at least she did give T-Core something. And then with Cam, he gave T-Core way more than they showed. In fact, Cam was like very adamant about how Tucker's a big threat, Tucker needs to go, Joseph needs to go as well. Again, this is what I'm saying of like Cam feeling like a different person. He was so much more forthright when it came to his targeting, and he made it very clear who he wanted to go. And it's just really great to see. I like seeing a much more active and much more confident Cam. I think he's always had that confidence in him, but he's always been like very chill, very sort of aloof in that way. And here he's exhibiting emotions that we legitimately have not seen him have this entire season, and have this genuine excitement that is just, I really do enjoy watching. He also is like in addition to what we saw in the show, he's really trying to work on his relationship with Leah, and it seems like things have kind of improved there. They've gone to a place where they're just arguing about nothing, to where it does generally seem like they want to work together. So again, I continue to be impressed by Cam this week. I think he put in some really good work, and I don't know why the show portrayed it as like him being indecisive about what to do. He actually did have a pretty solid idea, and T-Core kind of was like, saw this as like, okay, he's telling me all this information, but this is not really, something that, it doesn't really change the fact that, like, she still wanted to put him up and things like that. So, again, I don't understand why they decided to show the pitches in the way that they did. It kind of felt like they were trying to change the narrative a little bit, and that kind of did piss me off. But, yeah, other than that, not really much I can say in terms of, like, what we didn't see for Friday. Oh, Angela had a one-on-one with T-Core where basically she was, like, trying to prevent her from putting up Leah, because those two have really become like close, and she didn't want Leah to go on the block, so there's something as well. But other than that, again, not really much to talk about in terms of things we didn't see for this particular episode. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into Wednesday's episode, which is a very interesting episode to talk about. I was very worried for this episode, to be honest, because we knew that going into it, this was going to be a 2-hour episode, and if you remember last season, literally right around this time, same comp they do this week and everything, we got like a 2-hour episode, and it consisted of like 30 minutes of strategy, and then it was like a straight hour of this comp, and then punishments, and then quickly a segment of Jared not using the veto, and then the episode ended. Like that's what it was last year, and I was really prepared for that to be the case this time around. But thankfully, despite the fact that it was 2 hours, I honestly really was impressed by this episode. I actually thought they really did put this one together very well. Now, it does help that what happens is far more eventful this time around than where we were at last year, where things were kind of still up in the air as to whether or not Flip was going to happen. The chaos ramps up in this episode, so they definitely did have like a lot more to work with. I just feel like they really did a better job at balancing everything and taking advantage of those 2 hours. There's still some things in this episode I'm not crazy about, particularly the way they're adding some segments. I'll talk about that. But I really do feel like they took advantage of the time they had here. I've said this before. I do believe that them having longer episodes for Big Brother Reindeer games and how well those were, it reminded them of how to actually edit episodes. And this episode, I think, is very indicative of that. I think it's very well put together. I think it does a good job of showing a little bit of everybody. And I really did like the way things ended up going down here. But we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. The only other thing I really do want to talk about, because I don't think the show, again, portrayed it correctly, is why Tucker actually went on the block. Because the show makes it seem like Tucker himself volunteered, and this put the idea into T-Core's head, and then she ultimately just decided that, like, okay, Tucker's going up because he volunteered. That's not really how it went. Basically, T-Core started out this week wanting to find a way to get Tucker on the block because she finds Tucker to be this really big threat. She feels like Tucker has all these people around him because he does, and correctly, thought that he was someone that, at least needed to go on the block. She didn't necessarily want him to leave, but she at least wanted him to end up on the block. And so Kimo put the idea into her head that, like, if they can convince him to be a pawn, then maybe that would be the way to do it. And that's kind of how it happened. Now, the part that puzzles me is that Tucker later told Kimo, despite the fact that he talks to T-Core about the fact that he was okay with going on the block, he actually tells Kimo that he didn't really want to do that. and he does not relay this information back to T-Core. I guess he expected Kimo to relay back to T-Core, who did, but like still ended up going through with it. I don't know. It was a whole thing, but either way, I would have really liked a moment where T-Core was like, Tucker thinks that this is coincidental, but really I've been wanting him out since this point. I think that would have been kind of fun, but again, the show didn't portray it that way, and I don't really understand it. I think it would have been a lot more exciting if they had done that. So I think the first thing to really talk about, here is the fact that Tucker, after T-Core puts him on the block, is really not happy that she did so. He didn't actually think that she was going to go ahead and do it, and what I will say to that is you shouldn't have volunteered. Like, straight up, you should not have volunteered to go on the block. You absolutely did this to yourself. I know that he told Kimo he didn't want to, but he did it. He did volunteer, and he didn't tell T-Core not to do it. So, yeah, I think if he had honestly told her not to do it, I don't think she would have done it. I think that T-Core would have been able to be talked out of it, but because he didn't do that, he's on the block, and I really don't think he can be upset, but he should not be mad at T-Core here, because he basically gave her the opportunity to do it, and she did it. So, yeah, I don't think that he should be upset. I don't think he has a right to be, like, annoyed about this here. But basically, T-Core does some talking with some people here. She talks with Cam a little bit about how he's feeling, and he seems to be pretty good. You know, he says that he's okay as long as he's off the block and survives another week. However, he's really unsure what he really is to her at this point. What are they really supposed to be? Where are they at in this game? He really doesn't know that, and he wants to make sure that he wins the veto to help his game recover. So again, Cam is in a spot where he just really wants to do what he can to try to win this veto. He later has this really good conversation with Leah, who's really worried that she will be put up as a renom. She doesn't really feel like she has any support around her. She constantly feels like she's in this position where she has to fight for her spot, and she doesn't really have many people that are vouching for her, which is true, although if your name is Quinn and Joseph, you're always vouching for her a little bit too much. But basically, she doesn't really feel like she has any support, and he has people and she doesn't, but he reminds her that he was going to go home last week and she wasn't, and that's why he wants to fight as much as he does here. So that's, I thought, was a pretty good scene, the way that all ended up going down. We do get this moment with T-Core and Kimo where they talk to Tucker about how he really is the only one that can win the veto. They need to make sure that MJ does not win the veto here. If she's chosen, they need to make sure that doesn't happen. But they're also kind of hoping that he doesn't use the veto, so that then T-Core doesn't even have to make a renom. They don't have to worry about that, and Tucker will be fine regardless, because then Cam or MJ will go, and they won't even have to worry about that. So, you know, they're hoping that's going to be the case. Naively, I don't think there was any scenario where Tucker was not going to use the veto. This is Tucker we're talking about. He's always going to do something flashy. And then, really, the only other thing to talk about before the veto is Chelsie, who, I gotta say, really impressed me this week in numerous ways. I mean, remember, Chelsie is somebody whose alliance was outed last week. She voted on the wrong side of the house the week before that. Her closest ally just left the game. Like, she had every possible bad thing happen to her that seemed like it was grounds for her game declining. Any other player in Chelsea's situation, she isn't able to recover from what happened. She isn't able to, go back to the way things were. She only declines. She only ends up in a worse spot, and there are other people that end up taking her spot because she just doesn't have that capital around her. But instead, she takes this opportunity as kind of a new beginning to scoop up as many potential allies as she can and really try to work her way up from that positioning. And I thought she just killed it this week. I was so impressed by the work she puts in, specifically in this conversation with MJ, where MJ kind of talks about how she's feeling. Chelsie makes it clear that if she wins, she's going to take her off the block, and I thought this was great, because even though, no, she's not going to take her off the block, you have to prepare, and she is, of course, going to take off Cam if she wins. You have to prepare for every single scenario in the event that somebody wins, or that someone is still on the block, or something like that happens, or that person does win and she, you want to feel good with them. And Chelsie is absolutely doing that here. Let's say MJ wins the veto and things like that, and T-Core talks about putting up Chelsie. MJ will do what she can to try to, diffuse that. Now, yes, obviously, she's not going to put up Chelsie, because we know that's something that T-Core told basically everybody she doesn't want to do. But let's just say, hypothetically, she was going to. MJ has every reason now to fight for Chelsie just as much as she does for herself in that position. If MJ wins veto and things like that, and Chelsie is the renom, then, she'll try to do what she can to push otherwise. Again, I just think this was really good work from Chelsie, keeping MJ in her corner. I said this a couple weeks ago, she really needed to utilize that relationship more, and it really seems like she is doing so now, and I think it's really great work. I really like what she's doing. I like that she goes to Cam after the veto picks and kind of lets him know that that she's on his side and things like that. Again, just really good work from her. But we do then get to the veto picks, where ultimately Joseph is chosen by Cam for some reason. I don't know why. I feel like at this point, it is an obligation that Joseph has to compete in the veto. That no matter what happens, if veto's happening, Joseph has to be in there. It's just something that, I don't know, production's telling them, you gotta put Joseph in the comp. You gotta make sure he's there. And maybe it's just for the meme at this point, because he's not good at them. It's not like he's winning these comps. We know he's throwing them, but he's also just not good enough to even try to throw. So I feel like at this point, it's just for the meme. It's it'd be so funny if Joseph just keeps getting picked for veto over and over again, kind of like a reverse of what happened to Suri last season, where she was never chosen and never picked. It's so funny to me at this point. But again, even funnier that Cam picks Joseph, who he knows is not going to save him, who is not somebody that really has his back, who is not somebody that has his best interests. I don't know what he was thinking in doing this. The other person that is chosen here is Angela, and Angela obviously wants to try to save Tucker. At least at this point, she wants to try to save Tucker. But again, things were really gearing up. Chelsie obviously gets angry at Cam here for not choosing her, because she obviously was going to save him. Why pick somebody that wasn't going to save you over somebody that was going to? I totally understood her anger here, why she was annoyed at who Cam chose. It made perfect sense to me why she felt the way that she did. So then we get to the veto, which is the classic Yankee swap competition. I always enjoy watching this on the show, when you have a bunch of prizes, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, and just seeing the different strategies and how they swap it, who ends up with the veto, how things play out, the possible drama that ends up unfolding from this competition. But I feel like a lot of things this season, this comp is a perfect example of how much more well-rounded the competitions have been this season. Because last year's Yankee swap, if you remember, it was buddy games themed, and yes, they had the cornhole of it all. That's kind of what it was. It was you just kind of had to throw a beanbag onto a number, and that's kind of what it was. And then you but you also spin in a circle repeatedly while doing that, and there was this physical component to it. Just like almost every comp last season, they added some sort of physical components. But this season, really is the complete opposite, where you have a slingshot and that's it. It's literally just a slingshot comp. They removed the physical portion of it entirely, and it is so much better as a result. Yes, obviously the result that we get is not necessarily reflective of that, but again, I just have to praise Big Brother for doing that. But yeah, like I said, simple slingshot comp. Not really too much to talk about in terms of what the comp really was. But there's a bunch of swapping here, and it comes down to Tucker and Cam, and this was the moment. This was the moment where it's like, I think everybody expected that, feeds were going to come back and Tucker was going to have the veto around his neck. It just seemed like it made the most sense. He was on this hot streak, constantly winning all these comps. It just seemed like he was kind of unbeatable at this point, and it really did seem like this was just gonna be the case, and he was just gonna win his third veto in a row. But then we watch the comp play out, and it comes down to Tucker and Cam, and Tucker does not win the veto. It actually ends up being Cam, which was so shocking to me. One, really shows how much more Cam is clued, zoned into the game. Like, he is ready to just show his full potential at this point. Two, this was such a huge moment. How often do we see a situation where someone is winning all these comps consistently and then just doesn't? It doesn't usually happen this early on. If it happens later in the season. But the fact that it was happening now, it's like, oh my god, this might be really bad for Tucker. I don't know how this is really going to go, but this was really like the first hint that maybe this wasn't going to play out in the way that everyone thought, and also Tucker was hoping that it was going to. Maybe this was the sign that things might not end up going his way, and I thought it was very, very shocking to see. I think everyone kind of expected that Tucker was going to win the veto, but it doesn't happen. Cam ends up winning it. Really good win for him, too. I like seeing the first, genuine, grin on his face. There's that picture going around of, his cast photo, and it's he has this chill smile on his face, but to see him so ecstatic about the fact he won the veto, I thought that was just really great to see. So yeah, all in all, I really enjoyed getting to watch this comp, but so again, just I was just so shocked about the result here. I did not think it was going to go this way at all. Before we do get to everything else that ends up happening in this episode, I do want to quickly talk about all the different prizes and punishments that were dealt out to each of the house guests. So, first one here, Tucker, in addition to being the AI instigator, he also has to wear a costume that is known as the BB AI Assist Programmer, and basically what he has to do is he's asked questions, and every time he's asked a question, he has to go into this room with a bunch of BB-related encyclopedias, and he has to try to find the answer, and he's going to be, he has to keep going back and forth until he ends up getting the correct answer, and this is just the perfect punishment for Tucker. I love how, and I've said this before, I just love how much Tucker commits to something. When he's donning a character, he goes all out, he does a voice, he fully transforms, and he does this here. He acts like a robot the entire time. He's going back and forth trying to find the answer. It was just a really funny segment, and I feel like this was the perfect thing for Tucker to have. I really enjoyed getting to watch this, and I thought it was a really fun punishment, so I really did enjoy that one. And then Angela, meanwhile, has also kind of the perfect punishment here, where it's the classic comp where it's kind of what Brittany had in Big Brother 16 or what Shelly had in Big Brother 17, where they have to do a bunch of the same kind of tasks for an inordinate amount of hours, and they have to do the same type of tasks for an inordinate amount of times, and basically they have to do it within the allotted time, or they end up losing, or they cannot compete in the next HOH. And this time around, it's probably one of the most grueling we have seen, because she essentially has about 2,000 radioactive orbs, and she has to try to dispose of them in 12 hours. She has to keep going back and forth when doing this, which doesn't seem like a big deal. You're kind of just picking something up and then walking back and forth, but there's an added component to this where periodically she's also hosed down with this pink goo that's supposed to be the decontamination. This was insane, the way that this all went down, but Angela's reaction to it again was just absolute gold, as it's been all season. I loved seeing her just so increasingly stressed out and freaking out about this, but I also like seeing the support from all the house guests throughout this entire thing. Everyone's there watching her, trying to help her along, cheering her on when she's down to the end. I thought this was a really fun segment, and again, just continue to show just how much of a fun character Angela's been. But also, I think, again, I just really like watching the camaraderie and support of everyone. I thought that was all really great. And she gets it done in 9 hours. She doesn't even need the 12 hours. She gets it done like 4 hours before. So that was really great. I really liked the way that all played out. I thought that was a lot of fun to watch. Also, MJ gets a Hawaiian trip. There's that. Not really much to talk about there, but she's going to Hawaii. Good for her. Joseph, meanwhile, is easily, I think, the best one of them all is Joseph's, who is in solitary confinement, but this is no ordinary solitary confinement. Instead, he is in solitary confinement with a hologram of Matt, known as the Matrix, and this was just so much fun to watch. Basically, this is a Matt that is just constantly talking and droning on and on about whatever. At one point, he was talking about names that rhyme with Matt. There was one where he talked about, like, numbers that don't have an A in it. Another one where he talked about, he talked about other names besides Crazy Eyes, and this seemed like absolute torture. Like, I definitely would get so sick of this, and it's, like, impossible to, like, really focus on anything, but also just so much fun to watch. Seeing Joseph just increasingly lose his shit throughout this entire thing was just so funny, and I love the way this entire thing ended up playing out. I thought that was just a lot of fun to see go down in the way that it did. And I just really enjoyed this segment, but not quite as much as Joseph enjoyed himself during this segment. I'm not going to get more into that, but let's just say Joseph had some fun while he was in solitary. But either way, yeah, very fun segment to watch. I always enjoy when they do stuff like this. I think the punishment segments, they always put a lot of emphasis on them in the episodes, but because they have the 2 hours, it didn't feel like they were dragging them on and on. It also helped that this segment in particular, they kept cutting back to every so often as a way to kind of ease tension from everything else that's going on. So I actually enjoyed the way they did. I didn't think that they front-loaded the episode too much with punishments. I feel like last season they spent way too much time on this segment, followed by this segment, followed by this segment, but this time around it felt a lot more even-handed, and I think it just made for a much more entertaining, montage of punishments overall. It didn't feel like overkill. It really did feel a lot more smoother. It felt like it fit into the episode better, and so I enjoyed the way that they ended up doing this. I thought it was a lot of fun to watch. Now, in the midst of all the stuff going on, whether it be strategic conversations or stuff with the punishments, the other thing that we see recurring throughout this episode is the AI instigator shenanigans that Tucker is doing, and they range from simple things like him, calling, trying to now, after what happened with Rubina, trying to be a lot more sort of just fun and lax with this, and still backfiring on him. Basically, we see a segment earlier in the episode where a bunch of the, girls are teaching Angela how to twerk, and Tucker does a AI instigator of, I believe it was Rubina, talking about how Angela was the best of them all. Everybody thinks it's lame. Nobody thinks that it's funny. They all then start to believe that it was Angela and that she was the one behind it, and this kind of gets Tucker to now try to pivot. He has this avatar of Kimo kind of calling out Leah and how she has like all the boys wrapped around her finger, trying to then pin Leah as the instigator, but that doesn't end up working. And then finally he does a avatar of himself, talking about how now that he has now been put up by T-Core, he has his target set, he still wants to go after Chelsie. One thing I will say about this real quick, all of the avatars were really good. All of the avatars, like the voices were really on point and it sounded like them. Aside from Tucker's, who sounded absolutely nothing like him. Like, I don't know what happened with whoever constructed Tucker's voice, if they had some issue with, like, the the sound effects, or like they tried to modulate it to his voice and it didn't work, but it sounded like it was so off. It was so jarring to me. I could not believe like just how just how much they fucked up with that. You would think with Tucker's, considering he's the instigator, that like his would be the most polished, but like no, it was so bad I could barely even pay attention to what he was saying. The only reason I did is because, well, I had to take notes for this episode. But yeah, so it really does not end up going well for Tucker, and as a result, people are still blaming Angela. They still think she is the one behind this, so Tucker decides that, you know what, if people are going to keep pinning this on her, I got to go ahead and warn her about it. He is in the pool. He decides to casually warn her that people think it's her, but he doesn't, that he has her back, that he loves her, that he's legit about them being a final two, and I think he handles this as best as he can. I think he, does what he can to let her know that, hey, there's some people out there who speculate that you're doing this thing. I don't think it's you. Constantly, like, giving her hope that their final two is an actual thing, and that he wants to, keep that deal that they had, and that they're gonna go far together. I think he handles this perfectly, but because it's Angela that he's saying this to, she obviously, like she does with most things, takes this completely the wrong way. And she starts to doubt Tucker, and she starts to think that maybe what he's saying isn't legitimate. And again, because it's Angela, rather than really try to like take time to sit on this, she elects to just immediately do something about it. So she goes into a room with like MJ and Leah, and someone else was there. I can't remember who else was there, but just starts talking shit about Tucker, how he is someone that she doesn't trust, how he has all these, alliances, he has all these final twos, he's, in a position where no one's going to be able to beat him in the end, and I was astonished, like, generally. Like, listen, there's been a lot of baffling gameplay this season. Every week I talk about this. This is not a good cast on that front. A lot of these people just don't think through their decisions. But literally, I can't wrap my head around this at all. Angela was in a decent spot at this point. Angela was in a position where I generally thought she was going to be fine. Like, she was going to just sit around, make some connections here and there, slowly ingratiate herself into the game, not cause a lot of waves, and I thought she was going to be fine. And once she solidified things with Tucker, especially, I thought, okay, Angela's gonna turn around here. Angela's gonna know that Tucker has her back. She has proof that Tucker has her back. Everything's gonna be fine. She's now in 6th Avenue, even though they don't really want her there, as well as the tanks. They don't really want her in that alliance, but she still herself, seems like she's doing okay. People are actually valuing her. She's making good conversations with people. And then she does this. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, generally, I shouldn't be this confused because it is Angela. Admittedly, like, Angela is always going to do the thing that is the most, like, suboptimal for her. In fact, I would say suboptimal is putting it lightly. More so self-destructive. That's the most likely thing she's going to do. What can she do to put herself in the worst position possible? But truly, I could not have seen this coming. The way that she is so direct about going after Tucker and how she doesn't trust him anymore and is just, like, left and right talking about him. And mind you, talking about him to a group of people who absolutely want to take this guy out at any opportunity. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But she is like really adamant about the fact that they got to get him out. And so it was just really crazy the way this all happened. I would not have expected Angela to spiral in the way that she did. Even though, again, it was Angela, I really did think she was starting to turn things around. That she was going to end up in a spot where it's like, okay, she started off kind of rocky, but she really did improve as things went on. People started to include her more in things, and she started to feel more at ease with herself. But I generally do think what we're seeing now is that when Angela is with a side that's in power, she's fine. She feels like she's on top of the world. She feels like she's gonna be fine. She feels like, the sky's the limit. They're gonna go far. Everything's gonna be okay. But then the second that things start to go sideways and she gets an idea in her head that things are not going well, she just spirals off the deep end, and it is like impossible to get her back to reality. And the person that was bringing her back to reality last week is now the person that she's betraying. It's like insane to me the way this all went down. But again, it's Angela, and I really shouldn't be surprised, but yet I still was. Now, there is no possible way for me to talk about what happens next without discussing what I think is easily the thing that the show edited the worst this entire week, Quinn and Leah. So you guys know, I've talked about this on, in the What We Didn't See, but for a long time, Quinn has had this crush on Leah. It seemed like the two of them were potentially going to be a thing, working. She told him politely that she didn't really like him like that, but that she still wanted to work with him. And over time, it's gone from her not really feeling the way she does about him romantically, but still liking him as a person and wanting to potentially work with him, to straight up just bashing him at any given opportunity. And to me, that is a prime storyline for this show. The idea that Quinn thinks that he has this girl wrapped around his finger, but in reality, she can't stand him. And she's telling people that she finds him weird, that he's off-putting, that he bothers her, and that she feels uncomfortable around him. That is such a good storyline. There's so much content you can get out of that. And I was so ready to see how the show was going to portray it. I didn't know if they were going to show it, but finally here, we get some insight with Quinn and Leah, and they could not have portrayed it any more inaccurately than they do here. Because instead what they do is they show us a scene that I have to assume is from weeks ago. Because the way that this exchange went down felt like this was back when Leah was a little bit more lenient towards Quinn, when she was a little bit more favorable towards him. Certainly not now when she's just shitting on him any time that she can. But basically, he talks about how he's not going to flirt with her anymore, but that he still really likes her. There's a DR of Leah even saying that she doesn't like him romantically, but that she really likes him. And yeah, so they're going for the friend zone type edit here. That's what they're trying to do. It's not that Quinn is just delusional and doesn't realize that Leah wants nothing to do with him. No, she actually does care about him, but it's just not on a romantic level. No, that could not be further from what's happening. Again, is that a fun idea? Sure, but that feels like such an oversimplification of what's actually going on, and it generally, annoys me that this is how they're deciding to portray it, because it really is to the point where Leah just does not like the guy. It's not even that, she thinks that, he's a cool guy and she respects him and she likes hanging out with him. No, she just can't stand him at all. And I don't understand why they decided to edit him this way. Regardless of that, it's a very important segment because we later see in the episode that Tikor is very much considering putting up Leah at this point. It really seems like it's going to happen. Leah is the only person in the game that she doesn't have some sort of allegiance to that isn't on the block. Obviously MJ's already there, so she can't put her up, but Leah's the only other person that she doesn't have a deal with, and Quinn goes to Kimo, and Tikor kind of lets them in on the fact that he doesn't really want Leah to go up, but also lets them know about what Angela is doing, and that she's a loose cannon, and that they gotta get her out of here, they can't really trust her. And he also decides to go to Tucker and let Tucker know exactly what Angela is doing, that she's throwing him under the bus, that she is trying to, campaign against him. And Tucker is understandably very upset about this, because not only is this the woman that he used the veto on 2 weeks ago, but also knows that she is someone that has done this to a lot of people and did not think that it was going to be him. So he goes over to Angela to try to smooth things over, and it just isn't working. She talks about the fact that him and Rubina are too close, and that she doesn't trust him, and that she doesn't really, want anything to do with him, and he's telling her that regardless of this, he's even willing to take her to the final two, which, again, the type of ally that Tucker is just insane to me. Even the fact that she's doing all this and he still wants saving the final two, that alone should be an indication that this is legit. That should tell you that this is something. And She still doesn't believe it. She goes on talking about how, like, she doesn't feel special. She thinks that he'd be a fool to take her. And I mean, look, it's a really fun exchange. It's a very heated one, but it's also just really infuriating to watch because there's no reason why this should be happening. And to be honest, her defaming Tucker in the way that she does and trying to get everybody to go against him, it's not necessarily a bad idea if it was after the veto ceremony. If Angela was safe and she was doing this, that would have been a different story. If she was in a situation where, like, they were really trying to, like, get the votes onto Tucker and she decided to just go right for the jugular and start dragging him to everybody and letting them know why they can't trust him, then that would be a good move. This would get people to realize, oh wait, Angela actually doesn't trust Tucker. They're not a duo. They're not being seen as someone that's working together. They're not someone that, you know, she is someone that can vote with us. Maybe this can actually happen. That would actually be really good for her. But because of the fact that she's doing this before the veto ceremony, it all falls on deaf's ears. Like, nobody is caring about this, and instead, it's now just making them want to target Angela, and I don't really blame them, because how do you know that Angela isn't going to do this to you? How do you know that Angela isn't going to, you know, see you as her final two one day, and then immediately want to target you the next? How do you know that's not going to happen? So, yeah, I mean, this was just so insane the way this all went down. I couldn't believe this exchange even happened. But yeah, I mean, I think Tucker handled this as best as he really could, but also there really wasn't much he could do in this situation other than it basically gets T-Core to realize that she kind of has no choice but to put up Angela here. So again, I think Angela, I don't really know what she was trying to do. I really don't know what her move was here other than I think she just acted on her emotions like she usually does. But all she did was, like, heighten the target on her that was really never going to be there. T-Core was never really putting her up, and all it took was for her to just start being her, like, spirally, you know, just very messy self, and now all of a sudden she's probably going on the block and there's nothing she can do about it. So, again, just so wild the way this all went down. And then yet, even after all that, after Angela has confirmed to Tucker that, yes, I have been saying these things, yes, I don't trust you, I don't want to go I can't possibly go the M with you anymore, I need you out of this game, you're lying to me, he still doesn't want her to go on the block. He says to T-Core and Kimo that, like, he would rather have Leah go. He feels like Leah is a bigger threat. He doesn't see Leah as someone that has their back. He thinks Angela's more likely to have their back. And, yeah, I mean, again, just, like, you gotta give props to Tucker. Like, I could never be this loyal to somebody to the point where even after they've, like, dragged me, I still want to work with them. But I think the thing with Tucker is that he's trying to prove that he is this great ally. He really wanted to do that with Angela. He wants to be a man of his word. His core values mean a lot to him, and you're wondering what's really going to happen here, but we get to the veto ceremony, and despite him pleading to not let it happen, telling them that he'd be really upset if it does, T-Core does decide to, I think, do the easier move and put up Angela here in Cam's place, and that is really where we end this episode. Like I said, it was a really wild one, but for a 2-hour episode that had a lot of filler content, it turned out to be a lot more worthwhile than I really did expect to. And I actually think this particular segment, they really utilized that longer runtime very well, because it takes up, like, the last, like, 20 to 30 minutes of the episode, so they really can tell this story a lot more thoroughly than they usually have the time to do so, and I think they really did benefit from that here. Okay, so now that I've talked about everything that went down in that episode, let's just go ahead and talk about the things that we didn't see. And I will say, with this episode, I'm kind of coming up empty as to things that they didn't show. There are a couple things I can touch upon. They don't necessarily pertain just to this episode and what was going on, you know, this part of the week, but the week in general that I feel like is definitely worth noting. First of all, and this is really just speaking to just how different of a season it is, because one week you can have me come on here and say that Joseph is definitively playing the best game. He's very good strategically. He's like ahead of the curve. He's handling the game really well. He has people on his side, and I can feel really good about that. And then I can watch that video a couple days ago and think, what in the ever-living fuck was I talking about? Because, my God, this guy has dropped the ball so much this week. Look, I still think he has a good approach to the game strategically. There are still things he is doing well. The problem is he has seemingly picked up Quinn's issue with not being able to just shut up and keep things to himself. He will go to people and constantly hype himself up and talk about how he's in this great spot and talk about all these things that he's doing. He's made this, close, he's made this close bond with Leah, and he tells her everything, things that he absolutely shouldn't. He goes to Tucker and tells him everything. He has these cam talks with himself where he hypes himself up and says that he wants to go to Final 2 with Tucker and he's convinced that he would win over Tucker, when that is absolute insanity considering the people that he says he would have the vote over with Tucker. Like, my God, this guy is really not that good. The thing is, like, on paper, his strategy works really well. The idea that this guy is going to come in here, he doesn't have to win comps, he doesn't need to rely on them, he is able to work with somebody that is winning comps, and they can, he can kind of weasel his way into any group as a result. He has somebody on his side that nobody realizes is on his side, and they can kind of work together. I think all of that is great, but the problem is when you're being so obvious about it, it really doesn't end up working out for you. And unfortunately with Joseph, he's in a position where he honestly could go home next week. He really could, because people are just starting to see through what he's doing. And, whether it's T-Core and Kimo not wanting him in 6th Avenue, Chelsie constantly talking shit about him and wanting him out of this game, even Leah starting to get a little bit annoyed by him. I mean, Joseph is in just such treacherous waters right now, and I really don't know if he's gonna be able to get himself out of it, because in his mind he's playing this amazing game. And so I feel like what happened last week is he had a really good start to the week with Tucker, where he was able to kind of, get him, he was able to, like, fully utilize that duo. They were able to kind of plan things together. It seemed like things were going to work out. And now that he's not in that position, I'm really starting to see just how not adaptable Joseph is, how he's not able to, maintain his position, how he has this inability to, downplay his game. He wants to constantly hype himself up and act like he's playing a better game than he is. It's just, I still really like the guy. I think he's really fun to watch, but my God, he is so delusional right now, and it's kind of crazy how I've done such a 180 on him just in like a week. But again, that really just speaks to just how fluid this season is and how quickly others pick up on things here. And all of that's already bad enough, but then you factor into Joseph literally telling Leah that if she was going on the block, he was going to keep Tucker over her, making it clear that him and Tucker have a Final 2. It's just like, I don't know what happened. Like, I generally don't know what happened. I feel like he was in such a good spot last week. He found a way to, like, get Tucker fully on his side, which he did a good job with that, but the problem is I think he, like, is utilizing exactly the wrong people. I think he needs to focus more on his relationship with Leah. I think he needs to focus more on his relationship with, like, Quinn. Well, maybe not so much Quinn, because Quinn has the same exact problem as him, but, like, get back in with, like, a Chelsie or a Cam. Like, he's really not where he thinks he is in this house, and it becomes more laughable as it goes on, and because of that, they're not taking him seriously at this point, and I don't really blame them, because someone that I thought was playing this great game, honestly, is really dropping the ball because he just can't seem to keep his mouth shut. And it's kind of crazy to me that he's basically embodied all of Quinn's game, all down to the exact same flaws he had, although at least Joseph is better on, like, a strategic level, somewhat, but I think he's even, like... He's even tarnishing that. I can generally see a scenario where Joseph ends up going very soon, and I think this is a great example as to why. So, yeah, if I had to talk about someone I've done the biggest 180 on, it's 100% Joseph. My God. The other thing, though, to really talk about is how Angela actually got on the block, because I don't think the show covered this correctly at all. Yes, obviously, the whole thing she did with Tucker was a big reason for it, but the real reason was because Tikor was still, like, very much struggling between Leah and Angela. She had a good conversation with Leah where she wanted to let Leah in. You know, she seemed like Leah was someone that, you know, she was thankful that she didn't put her on the block. She, you know, was giving her... you know, a lot of information. She mentioned how, like I said, she wanted to go for MJ. Even talked to her a lot more about Quinn and how she didn't trust him, which she tried to get Quinn to know about, and he still didn't want to listen because that's Quinn for you. Only his perception of Leah, I guess, is the only perception. You should have told him in week 4, but that's a whole different discussion. But yeah, so that's going on. And then when Angela did what she did, Tikor still was, like, kind of confused as to what to really make of it, and what actually ended up happening was Angela came to Tikor and basically said, oh my god, I messed up, you gotta put me on the block, and Tikor pretty much at that point had to. Like, she felt like she had no other choice, so she put her on the block, and that's essentially how that ended up going down. So, yes, Quinn helped, and the reason why Tikor left Leah off the block was for Quinn. Like, she made that clear that, like, we're doing this for Quinn. But I do think had Angela not come to her and say, you gotta put me on the block, I think Tikor still would have been contemplating it, and she still would have been a bit more hesitant. So, yeah, that's ultimately how that really came to be. She absolutely did it to herself, really has nobody to blame at that point but herself. She honestly probably would have been fine if she, again, had done that after the veto ceremony, but because she decided to before, it just completely backfired on her, and it made things so much worse for her as a result. And then really the only other thing I want to discuss is the AI Instigator. The only thing they didn't really show on the episodes, because they're kind of boring, are some of the other avatars that Tucker ended up doing. He did one with Leah that was basically her just talking about he did one with Leah with her just talking about dinner and this, like, elongated recipe. He did another one with Tikor where she was giving him crochet tips, and something that the show kind of touches upon but not really is that he was kind of trying to lean into the idea that something the show kind of touches upon, but not really, is that a lot of people were convinced that because Big Brother didn't say that this was, like, a power or anything, that this was something for a comp, and that this was going to be appearing throughout the week periodically as a way to get them to study. So a lot of them were trying to remember things that were happening, and Tucker really wanted to lean into this. He thought, okay, if they think it's a comp, I'm going to do everything to act like the things that are being said is a comp, and so that's kind of why he decided to do it the way that he did. Again, ultimately, I think it didn't really work out for him, but that's kind of why that ended up going down. So that's really all else there is to say. Everything else I can talk about kind of happens before the eviction, and we'll talk about all of that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything in terms of, like, what we didn't see. I can't really think of anything else. If there's something else that comes to mind, I'll edit it in. But right now, that's really all I can think of. Alright, so with all that said, let's just go ahead and dive into Thursday's episode because, my god, this is, once again, similar to last week, such a monumental eviction episode. I don't think it's quite on the level of the Cedric one because things were a little bit more clear-cut this time around. The, like, massive strategy talks and things like that, we don't really see as much of that, but still, nevertheless, a very shocking episode. And right away, I mean, we already see this is going to be a pretty intense one with Angela now on the block. She kind of continues the trend of what we've been seeing lately, where people are on the block and then starting chaos immediately after the veto ceremony. Again, I think this just speaks to how great this season has really been. A lot of the times, you have the veto ceremony and then everyone kind of goes their separate ways, but this season that's not the case. Everyone's just creating chaos, and Angela is just being her usual self. She is calling out people left and right, basically talking about how, she calls out 6th Avenue. She talks about how she's been playing this, really honest game, and she doesn't understand why this is happening, and that it probably bit her in the ass, and she's calling out Quinn and things like that. And, how Tucker was lying to her, but she doesn't want to count herself out. She's already won, 2 HOHs, and I could not believe how long this went on. There was a point where I thought she was over, and it just continued. We were cutting to DRs, and I thought, okay, surely we're going to cut to something else, and then it's still Angela ranting on and on. Never, very entertaining regardless, but my god, again, I can't believe that Angela would do all of this again. You would think that she would know what happened last time that got her into the position, but yet she's doing the same thing. I think it's just a testament to how a lot of the time when people are playing a certain type of game in the season, they don't usually know how to improve upon that. Good players can do that, like Chelsie, for example, is already improving on that. I think T-Core and Kimo are recognizing what they did wrong before, and they're kind of improving on it, but someone like Angela, I just don't think is ever going to get it. I think this is going to be her entire game. She's going to have these, really high highs and these really low lows, and this is, the perfect example of that, and, yeah, I mean, she isn't mad. I will say this, she isn't mad at T-Core, which I was kind of surprised about. She kind of feels but it makes sense, because like I said, she basically volunteered for this. She basically told T-Core to put her up, so, she's, really the only person that she's not mad at, but still, what an exciting way to start off what ends up being just such an explosive episode. Now, the other big thing to talk about here is, of course, Rubina and Tucker. We have really seen this become, a bona fide showmance at this point, but Rubina is starting to be a little bit worried, because Tucker is, really upset at T-Core. He is feeling really betrayed that this actually ended up happening. Rubina's kind of trying to talk him out of it, how, he feels defeated, and look, I will say this. Do I feel bad for Tucker that, he trusted T-Core and her trust level was not on the same, and that she put him up and then didn't, and he told them to put up Leah and then she didn't listen? Yes, I feel bad for him in that regard, but again, he volunteered. He told her, if you need a pawn, I am willing to go up. He should not be surprised that she ended up going in this direction when she had three nominees, and I just feel again, you don't get to be mad at this. Yes, you can be upset that she didn't listen to you about putting up Leah, but putting you up and things like that, I just don't feel like Tucker, I get what he's saying, though, he feels like he's playing a different game from everybody else. He has this quote where it's I'm playing varsity, they're playing JV. I said this on Twitter, if we're gauging, varsity based on the most entertaining players, I mean, Tucker's top of the list, but if we're basing it off of, strategic players who actually know what they're doing, Tucker's, nowhere near there. Generally, nowhere near there. I understand at this point he's just venting, he's just kind of upset over what happened and things like that, but again, I don't really think he gets to be that mad about this, considering it's not like T-Core did this out of nowhere. He kind of asked for it. He kind of asked for her to do it. Didn't ask her to put him up, but basically said, hey, if you need to put anyone up, I'm okay with it, and now is, all upset and whatnot. But the thing with Rubina that is so frustrating to me is that most of the time, when you are in a showmance, right, that is your emotional security. That is the person that you vent to. That is the person that you feel the closest with. That is the person that you put above literally everybody else. And instead of Rubina feeling okay, her and Tucker are good, that, she knows that he has her back, she actually starts to believe that maybe he doesn't, and that there might be some doubts. Apparently they didn't even lock down a final two, which is just absolutely insane to me, considering that they're literally a showmance and people are seeing them as a duo, but they haven't solidified anything. And so she's questioning, whether or not he actually thinks this is legit, because he says he doesn't know what's real anymore. And I will say this about Rubina. I think that she's had a lot of potential. I really feel like she's just kind of checked out of the game at this point. I feel like what's happened is she has gotten so close with Tucker and so focused on their relationship that everything else has kind of fallen by the wayside, and I really don't know if she's going to be able to recover. And I think despite the fact of what happens, in this episode, I still don't think Rubina's in that great of a spot. And I'll talk about why when, I talk about what happens at the end of this. But again, this was crazy. The fact that she was even questioning the validity of their relationship, I love it. It's very messy, but I just couldn't believe that she somehow thought that maybe there wasn't some truth to what's going on. But also, that's kind of on Tucker as well. If you're gonna have a showmance, you probably should make some kind of deal that it's the two of us. At least reassure her that it's the two of us no matter what. I'm good with you. We're going to the end together. But apparently he didn't really do that, and that's really sketched her out. So again, just really messy the way things end up playing out here. Now, to Tucker's credit, he does reassure her that the love we have is real. I have your back. This is the most important thing to me. But Rubina still isn't fully sure of it. She still is kind of questioning. She definitely knows that the two of them, the love they have is real, but she doesn't really know what it means in a game sense. And again, I think a lot of that is due to the fact that, one, they really have only started solidifying the showmance early on. But also, it's not one of those things where they had a really close bond prior to this. Yes, they were flirting a lot, but I guess they didn't lock anything down, which is kind of crazy to me, that it ended up happening that way. You would think this would just be such a no-brainer, but again, I think most things, Tucker does handle this conversation really well. Again, it really just comes down to the fact that they didn't have any type of deal, and that was really worrying her. So that's kind of what happens there. But of course, the real big part of this episode is everything going down with Chelsie, who, like I said, to me, really comes out on top this week. I think Chelsie is someone who I just kind of continue to be very impressed by. This is not a house that is very good, obviously, from what I said, from strategically, but the one thing that they especially lack is the ability to adapt. A lot of them are having issues with remaining in the same spot, not being able to do anything to deviate away from that. We see Quinn has this problem, Joseph has this problem, MJ has certainly had this problem all season. Angela, absolutely, probably the best example of someone who's had this problem. Brooklyn last week had this problem, but in a cast where there aren't a lot of people that are able to recognize their positioning and find a way to maybe get themselves out of it, Chelsie is head and shoulders above everybody in terms of that, because the work that she puts in this week is generally so impressive. I really love the way this went down, because she has this conversation with Cam. They're kind of talking about votes and how they really want things to go. And she asked Cam, hey, who do you want to, put up? Who do you really want to get out? And Cam mentions that he would like for it to be Tucker. He would really like for Tucker to go, but they don't really know if they have the votes to get him out. And she kind of tells him, if there's an opportunity, they really do need to take it. And I wholeheartedly agree with Chelsie here. I feel especially after watching an entire season, in BB25 of the same people winning comps over and over again, Tucker's one of those people where, because he has won so much and he has developed this army of sorts around him, once you have the ability to get him out, you need to take it. And so I really like the fact that Chelsie gets to work here. And what is so impressive, especially, is that she does basically all of it on her own. This is not one of those things where it's like, all right, Cam, you work on Leah, I'll work on MJ, you know, I'll focus on talking to Quinn, you focus on talking to, like, Joseph. No, that's not how this goes. Chelsie basically does all of this herself, and I thought it was just so, again, I was just so amazed by how she was so quickly able to get people on her side here. She has a conversation with Leah where they kind of talk about how MJ's going to go home if it's her and Tucker. You know, Leah believes that they absolutely have bigger fish to fry and Tucker needs to go as a result. They really have to get to work. MJ also really wants to see Tucker go at this point, but they're really not sure if they have the votes. They're also really wary of just the four of Kimo, Tucker, Rubina, and T-Core. They really think that they're becoming like a serious grouping of sorts that is definitely something to be worried about, and so that's something that she does. She talks to Quinn, who, you know, is like ecstatic about the fact that, oh my god, we might actually be able to get out Tucker after they've been beefing like back and forth like for weeks now. He's really happy they're able to do it. He agrees that but they kind of agree that like they need to have each other's backs. They need to stay fully loyal to each other. And what's so great about this is that, like, again, Quinn is like fully let in. She knows how to talk to Quinn here. She knows that she needs to get him on, you know, she knows that she needs to try to like let bygones be bygones, try to remind him of like the Pentagon and things like that. And again, it's just so impressive the way that she's able to do this, and he really wants to send him out. He's not really sure if they have the votes, but now hearing that MJ's on board, he's like really down for the idea of it happening. And again, I've said it after every single week, I feel like I say this, but like, this is why that AI arena is so great. I was really starting to feel like at this point, maybe we don't need the AI arena. Maybe it has run its course. Do we really need it still at Final 11? But I feel like this episode is indicative of why it's okay for it to go as long as it does. If it keeps going, which I think it probably ends next week. If I had to guess, I think it ends next week, because why would you continue it at single digits? That just doesn't make any sense. But if you have to continue it, I think this is really the benefit here, is that you're able to have these like super strategic conversations. You're able to have this talk of, well, let's go this way. You know, you have Chelsie, who is able to get everyone, and again, it's just so impressive the way that she's able to do that. But what I think is even more impressive with Chelsie is that normally when someone is at the bottom, after their alliance has been outed, after their entire power structure has been dismantled, they normally stay there. You're not usually able to recover. It's very rare that they recover and end up in a place where maybe they're even able to retain that power they once had. But I think Chelsie does such great work here that she might just end up finding herself back in that spot. She might just find herself running the game again, and it's just so impressive the way she's able to turn things around. So just really great work from Chelsie here. I was really excited to see how it's going to go down. Obviously, I didn't want to see Tucker go, but I really loved how much she got to work here. I don't think the show mentioned this at all, but like, she did basically all of this in the course of a day. And again, the fact that she did it all on her own, she had these conversations with people, they were able to quickly get on the same page. Again, just brilliant work by her all around. I love the way that she handled all of this. Now, that being said, it then is time for the AI arena. And look, regardless of the fact that we just had this segment over all of this talk of blindsiding Tucker and getting him out, I still didn't really believe that it was going to go that way. I still thought that, okay, we had that segment with Chelsie last week. That didn't really come to fruition. I feel like Tucker being the AI arena, maybe he didn't win veto, but I feel like he's going to win AI arena. It just kind of makes sense. I feel like MJ's probably going to end up going here. That just seems like the most likely outcome. But then the comp happens, and it's another puzzle, but not quite the way that, which we know that Tucker really likes. He was very adamant about that, confessing his affinity for puzzles in the second week, which again, is really great to see. But it's not quite as successful this time around. Basically, they had to build this puzzle where they have to pick the correct password, and basically they have to put it together on these pieces, and then buzz in whoever does first is going to win. And it turns out to be a really fast comp where you really don't know what's going to happen. And then pretty much like just a few minutes afterwards, this is not like last week where it took like 10 minutes for them to figure out this comp and declare a winner. MJ wins the AI arena, and this was insane. This was absolutely insane to me because, again, despite the fact that these conversations were happening with Tucker, I guess I just didn't see the possibility of him actually losing the AI arena, let alone flopping in the AI arena. I mean, he did so bad, he wasn't even close. Like, Angela was ahead of him. Like, that's the level that we were at here. He did so terrible in this competition. And, yeah, I mean, this was just crazy to me. But the thing I really do want to talk about here is the fact that all this time we've been saying Tucker's undefeated, Tucker is the champion of the AI arena. I don't know if we can say that anymore. I honestly think that the real threat all along, after us saying Tucker is the person who is the king of comps, I think it honestly might end up becoming MJ. I think at this point, if you put MJ in the AI arena, you are basically saying that you want MJ to come down. Like, that's basically what you're doing, because it just seems impossible to get her out to this point. And at this point, I have to be impressed. Like, she is winning comps when she needs it. She shows up when you don't expect her to. I certainly did not expect her to win this comp. I thought for sure it was going to be Tucker and it was going to be Angela and MJ was going to go. But no, out of nowhere, MJ once again just impresses us. And despite the fact that I really have not been that high on her all season, I have to go ahead and just give her credit where credit is due. And again, she really did show up in this competition, and just what a insane win all around, especially the fact that Tucker didn't even come close in this competition. It really did seem like, okay, this might actually be an inevitability, and for the second time this season, MJ winning kind of solidified the way things were maybe actually going to go down here. So then, of course, we get to the strategizing portion of this episode, and the second MJ comes back, I mean, everyone is just in utter shock that she actually ended up winning this. I think everybody expected that Tucker was going to come out victorious and that all these conversations, they wouldn't be worth it and that they'd just be voting out MJ tonight. I think that's what they expected, but then they realize, oh my god, this might actually happen. We might actually have the opportunity to get Tucker out, and we see a little bit of strategizing where Angela is just basically just peak Angela here, saying that, like, she wants to stay, she's wanted this forever, she, wants to prove that it can come true, she wants to be their friend, she wants to comfort them, just doing what Angela does. You have Tucker trying to get people's votes while she's talking to Quinn, saying that he needs his vote. There's a moment where they then all strategize, they go in only to go into a room together and then completely shut Tucker and Angela out. I mean, I just want to know, like, what was said in this room? What ended up happening? Because it seemed like it had such a, like, emotional impact on so many people. Joseph was, like, bawling his eyes out. Cam was, like, really emotional during this. A lot of people seemed to be really touched, really affected by what happened. And I don't know if it was just voting Tucker out or if there was something more that was said. I'm sure we'll find out on Sunday's episode, which, is tonight, by the way. That's when I'm recording this. So, again, just a really interesting way that this all went down. But we get to the pitches, and Angela once again just gives such a impassioned speech that at this point is like kind of something that you have to start recognizing. You have to recognize that, like, when Angela is on the block, it is almost impossible to make an argument against her, because though she is saying stuff that might not necessarily be true, how, she's someone that is going to remain loyal, she cares so much about them, she wants to fight, she's connected with all of them, she wants to get to live with them, she doesn't want to ride, Tucker's coattails and things like that. it's one of those things where it's just so impassioned in that way that you really can't make an argument against it. And I feel like Angela is going to start to become someone that they kind of start weaponizing that against whoever is on the block. They weaponize the fact that she's going to give this really heartfelt and emotional plea, so it's going to be impossible to start to get her out. And I think that we really do see that here. Tucker, meanwhile, I think gives a really good pitch, kind of talking about how at the end of the day, this is a game for him, and that he wants to keep things light and fun, but it's just a game, and he hopes he can be part of the game somehow. And again, I really like the way that this was done. I love the way Tucker handles this stuff, despite the fact that I think he kind of knew that he was going to go here. I think he handles it as gracefully as he really can. But then we get down to the vote, and still, even though we knew that this was going to happen, I still, in the back of my mind, was like, well, maybe they just go for Angela here. Maybe that's a possibility. Maybe Angela just, shot herself in the foot too much to where she's not able to recover, and Angela ends up going. But we get down to the vote, and it ends up being a 5-3 with Tucker actually getting evicted, and is now the 6th person to leave the game, and just absolutely just such a unprecedented event. Like, I don't think we can understate enough how rare something like this actually happens. Especially the fact that, like, when you have a character like Tucker, who is such a massive presence throughout the entire season, had so many DRs, had so many just, had this, all these crazy comp wins, did all this very out-of-pocket stuff at, like, veto ceremonies and things like that, was such an unpredictable and flashy player, and clearly, I think, really was, like, the star of the season from a production standpoint. You could tell that they really did see Tucker in that way. Normally, it just kind of sticks like that. It normally doesn't end with that person leaving, let alone leaving pre-jury. Tucker doesn't even make the jury here, and I just feel like this is something that we just don't get to see enough of. And despite the fact that, like, I have loved Tucker this entire game, I think he's just such a fun and dynamic presence. He was so refreshing, and just how authentically himself he was, how he, is someone who plays the game hard, but yet he still has all this, like, respect and love for people. You kind of just have to take, you kind of just have to take a second to really revel in all of that. We don't normally see a presence like Tucker in the game, and it's just really great to see just how much effort he poured into this game, and how much his heart and soul was really in it. But also the fact that it does end in him actually leaving. That's just such a rarity in Big Brother US, in Big Brother, let alone in Big Brother US. And so, while yes, it's really unfortunate to see because I really enjoyed Tucker, I think this is still just such a testament to the way this season has been, with the fact that they were able to pull off such a huge blindside in this way. Jumping for joy at the fact that she's actually getting to do this. When you see, Leah walk in all confident that she's going to be able to vote Tucker out. Quinn being excited for, again, it's just a testament to how good this cast is. Normally, I would be devastated to see this. And yes, it is sad to see it happen. I think Tucker's been such a fun character. This is such a, seems like such a huge loss to the season, but it's such a dynamic cast in that way. And there was so much on the line for so many people that it actually was really just such a fun moment to get to watch all of this play out. But then, of course, we get to his exit interview, which, look, I said Brooklyn's interview I think was probably the highlights in terms of the exit interviews this season. No, this easily walks away as I think the best exit interview we have had. First of all, just Julie's utter love for Tucker is so evident here. She literally gets up to hug him, talks to him like she's talking to a close friend. I mean, you can just tell how loved Tucker is by production. There is no doubt in my mind that he absolutely will come back the first opportunity they get for him. I can definitely see that happening. I'm hoping it's not next season. I don't want this to be like a Paul and Big Brother 19 where we really like them on the season and then Big Brother 19 happens and it kind of ruins some of their goodwill. I hope that doesn't happen. with Tucker. If he's brought back, I want to see him brought back on a returnee season because I think he'd really thrive. But anyway, getting to his exit interview, they talk a little bit about if he threw the comp, and he talks about that, no, he did not throw this comp here, even though this was something that he was maybe thinking of doing. Ultimately, he basically built it backwards. And this is, again, just like classic Big Brother. Like, you can have a situation where there's a where Caitlyn is going to come back in the game. It's such a guarantee, but then it's a 5-piece puzzle and she gets sketched out and she can't complete it. And then you can have Tucker, who has been just such a force in competitions, and then the one comp win he really needs, he isn't able to achieve it, and he ends up choking, and as a result, ends up getting himself out. I feel like that is very plausible. I've seen people say that they don't believe that Tucker actually, wasn't able to understand it, that Tucker through the comp, and I just feel like this makes a lot more sense because, again, why would he throw this comp? He had to have known that he was leaving. I don't think Tucker actually wanted to leave despite the fact he was telling them that. I don't think at the end of the day he actually would if he was given the opportunity. I think he would fight as hard as he could. That's just kind of the player he's been all season. Basically, he talks about how he loves puzzles, but he just kind of misunderstood this one. But I also like what he says in his interview, where he knows for sure that this is a game, and that he knows where his votes are, but he knows that they're all lovely people, and when they had a shot to take, they had to take it. He is surprised that MJ didn't vote for him because he thought that that she made it clear that she wasn't going to vote that way, but he also talks about how with Angela, he's a man of his word. He really wanted to stick to it. He was hoping that if she stayed, she'd blindly believe him, and obviously that didn't end up happening. But again, just such a great interview. I love just how well Tucker ends up taking this. He can be this, super cutthroat player where he's willing to do things that nobody else is willing to do, but at the end of the day, still recognize that it's just a game. And that is why I have so much respect for Tucker, not just as a player, but as a person, that he can leave all that on the line and recognize that at the end of the day, they are people, and it's just a game, and the move had to be made, and he's not going to be super bitter about it. I think that is something that is just so commendable. So many times, and not saying that when people are upset, they don't have a right to be upset. Everyone's going to react differently. I just really like seeing Tucker be, like I said, this super, firecracker of a player where he's doing all this crazy shit, but yet also is able to look at the game as simply just that, and when it's all over, still want to befriend these people, not badmouth them. It's just really refreshing to watch. So many times when we have a personality like Tucker, they're usually just going on these elongated rants about these players, and I just don't see Tucker doing that. I think he has too much love for everybody. I think he's just too much of this just really just stand-up guy that generally cares about people, and I think we really do see that throughout this interview. So again, I just really enjoyed this. But then we do get to the AI instigator of how much money he was going to win, and come on, I don't think there was any debate whatsoever. He gets the 20K. I don't think anybody was expecting anything different, despite the fact that I don't think he really handled this to the best of his ability. I also feel like it was kind of a disadvantage for him in the first place. I feel like this was something that was really hard to do for most people, so I think he did the best that he could. And I think also, this was gonna happen regardless. It's Tucker. People love Tucker. I don't think he was gonna get less than the most, so I wasn't too surprised about this. He talks about Rubina a bit, that he really does want to see them go far. He thinks it's gonna be really hard to not see her, but he's gonna be watching and rooting for her, and, he tried to play as hard as he could, and again, I really liked getting to see all of this. I really like the way all of this played out. It really does suck to see Tucker go at this point. I really did feel like, after last week especially, that, he's in such a better position. He is in a place where he's going to be fine. Even if he doesn't win a comp, he has people on his side that are going to vouch for him at any given opportunity. But I really do feel he squandered that this week. The second that he volunteered for the block, and then T-Core put him up, and then being the AI instigator, and, doing what he did, I just think it put him in such a bad spot, and he really was never able to recover. And then Angela having all this, spilling all this, dirt on him, much of which wasn't even true. Again, it just really was not looking great for Tucker. I think had he not volunteered, things go completely differently, and I think we're in a situation where Tucker is absolutely one of the front runners to potentially win this entire thing. I really do think we were heading towards that. So, I mean, it opens up the game a ton, and that's really, I mean, it's a really shocking move, but it's one that absolutely needed to be made. And as much as it does suck to see him go, I think that he was just such a fun character in the way that he was. He kept things interesting. He kept things exciting. He was playing the game in a way that we don't normally see it happen. Do I think that it was like great gameplay? Not by a long shot for sure, but it was actually starting to kind of work out for him. So again, I think if he had just not volunteered for the block, I actually think Tucker had the potential to have a serious run in this game, and I think it all just kind of came up short just by some very short-sighted decisions, and unfortunately it really did get him, it got him sent out, but either way, just what an incredible player to watch, what a great personality, one of the most refreshing we've seen in years, and definitely while I do believe that this season is still going to remain exciting, it definitely is going to feel like a big loss seeing him go so early in the way that he did. So sucks to see him go, but at the same time really do love just the unpredictability of this season overall. And the other thing is, someone like Tucker, who is this huge comp beast, who was in such a decent position last week, I think we should just be happy about the fact that, he ended while we still were a fan of him. He ended the season while we still weren't annoyed by him, because I think give it just 2 to 3 weeks, and there was a possibility that Tucker could start becoming a bit more grating, because he was starting to become a player that was starting to develop this following, and as such, he was becoming a bit more lackadaisical. He was becoming a bit more cocky in that way. He was starting to believe that things were just gonna go his way no matter what, and there was something kind of endearing about that. I like his naivety. I think that's fun to watch, but if he kept winning over and over and over again, you saw what happened with Jag last season. People really liked Jag at first, and then he started to win constantly, and we really just started to become a lot more annoyed by him as a result. And I feel like things could have maybe turned out that way with Tucker. Now, Tucker definitely is not nearly as annoying as Jag was in terms of there's bullies and things like that, and you can't play the game dishonorably while he continues to blindside people and things like that, and kind of is very hypocritical in that way. But regardless, I do think there was a possibility that things could have headed in that direction, so I think we should just be happy about the fact that Tucker left while we still liked him, and I do think that is a rarity at this point in a Big Brother season. Okay, so before I do get into just my general thoughts on the week, let me just talk about some things that we didn't see, and I really only have 2 things, because there's really just 2 major things to talk about here that I really do think is imperative to talk about. The biggest of which is, if you had to ask me right now, why did Tucker get targeted in the way that he did? I don't actually think it's because of all these comp wins. I don't think it's because of him volunteering for the block. I think those things alone, yes, obviously, big red flags. You gotta vote him out. Yes, definitely those are reasons. But what really solidified him as he is going home this week, and he has really no shot at surviving unless he wins AI Arena, is him deciding to out him and Rubina's showmance. Because to be honest with you, Tucker was in a position where, despite the fact that him and Rubina were very close, they weren't exactly being seen as a duo. T-Core and Kimo were being seen as a duo. Angela and Tucker were being seen as a duo, but not really Tucker and Rubina. They were actually doing a pretty good job of downplaying it. People didn't really see it as a big deal. And I get again that Tucker was trying to, get them to a place where they didn't have to hide it anymore, but I don't think he considered the idea that in doing so, it made it so now everyone was seeing them as a duo. That's yet another person on Tucker's side in his arsenal that's always going to bat for him, and it just became too much. And him doing what he did with the AI Instigator already was bad, but what really, I think, set things down a negative path for him is literally the night before the eviction, Tucker and Rubina decide to make out in front of the entire house. Everyone starts cheering for them like they just got engaged or something, and I was baffled when I saw this, because look, I get it that you want to, show off your showmans and you want to be really happy about the relation with you're in. And in any other scenario, if you're not playing a game, yes, by all means do that. Show off your partner, show how much you love them, show the connection that the two of you have formed, Yes, obviously do that. Everyone's going to be really excited. But in this scenario, they really just needed to continue to downplay it. Rubina is so adamant on saying, like, me and Tucker are playing separate games, yet the two of them are pretty much attached at the hip all week, and people are starting to notice the fact that they're attached at the hip all week, and this also really ruined a lot of Tucker's other deals he had made with people. If you remember, Leah throughout the whole season has had a crush on him, and I think that was really starting to hurt her game, but really helped Tucker to where he was in a spot where Leah was willing to just kind of tell him anything. Same with MJ, but the second they saw that him and Rubina were getting close, they started to realize that maybe this isn't legit. Maybe we need to turn on Tucker, and that's really what did it. Angela, despite the fact that, again, I think what she did was completely unnecessary, that all stemmed from the fact that she knew that him and Rubina were a couple, and that she saw that he would take her over, that he would always take Rubina over her, and was convinced that that was the case. Again, none of these things end up happening if Tucker does not make it clear that him and Rubina are together, and that they are this, they have this undying love for each other. You can do that, but do it after the season. Do it when things are a little bit less crucial for you. Even when there's less people in the house. I think that's the time that you do it. Not when there's still like 10 people left. I think this was really just such a huge oversight on his end. And I think it really is kind of what solidified him ending up in the spot that he did. Because already, yes, he was making headway as like a potential target. We got to get him out. But I honestly do think before everything happened with him and Rubina, there was almost like zero chance that Tucker was going to go this week. It was going to be Angela. It was going to be MJ. And then Tucker doing what he did was just had such a massive negative impact on his game that pretty much everybody that wasn't, T-Core, Rubina, and Kimo wanted him out at that point, and there was really, and also Joseph, there was nothing he could do to really stop it, and again, I think it just really ended up hurting him. So again, I do think he puts in some good work this week. He maintained his relationships with Joseph. He actually was able to get T-Core back on his side, despite the fact that he was upset with her. They had like a good conversation, but so many of his other relationships, I think he just completely ended up dropping the ball on this week, and it really is, again, I think just due to what he thought was going to be this really great sort of moment for him and Rubina. It turned out to be kind of the thing that tanked his entire game, and there's really nothing he could have done about it at this point. So yeah, if you had to ask me right now, like, what really sent Tucker out of the game, yes, obviously the comp wins. Yes, obviously, him volunteering for the block, not great, but him, outing the fact that him and Rubina are together, I think that really is just what set things in motion, and there really was just, from there was just this constant momentum that kept building up throughout the week, and it just got to a point where there was just nothing he could really do about it. So I really think at the end of the day, that's what it does come down to. And then really the only other thing I do want to talk about is quickly with MJ, who I think is starting to turn things around. She's starting to wake up a bit. She's starting to realize who is on her side, but she's also still very behind on information because of the fact that she has really not been in the loop of things. She's kind of starting to figure things out way too late in the game, and as such, she's starting to think of alliance names that are threatening, that are no longer relevant, and one of them is the ball players. If you remember, this was an alliance that, like, Cam and Tucker and Joseph and Kenny and Cedric, they were all involved in. They were worried that there was going to be this women's alliance, and they wanted to make this as a way to kind of counter that. And you would think that because of the fact that Tucker was in this alliance, named the alliance, mind you, that he would remember when MJ is telling him that the Ballers are a threat, her thinking that this is an alliance consisting of like Quinn and Cam and Chelsie, that he's going to know that this is bullshit and that he's going to go along with it, but surely he's not going to start to do anything about it. Well, Somehow he does. Despite the fact that Tucker knew that this alliance wasn't a real thing, that this sounded eeringly similar to the one that he formed in week 3, he believed MJ that this might actually be a legitimate alliance. And again, just another example of just, I think, how fluid the house has become to the point where now nobody can even remember who was in what alliance. And this is just really what this season has become at this point. Normally, when there is an alliance, it becomes so obvious who's in it. But because so many alliances are just shattering like the second they form and nothing is really solidifying, people are starting to mix up alliance names and who was in what alliance, and this is like the perfect example that I don't think this is the only time we're going to see this happen. I think, honestly, the more the season goes on, the more we're going to start to see this confusion happen until there is some kind of solidified alliance. I think this is just going to be a thing for a bit where people start to believe that others are in alliances that maybe existed, but they were never included in it and therefore have their information wrong. And I think we're going to continue, but I think that this is definitely something to watch out for. I like the fact that MJ is starting to become a bit more active, that she's actually starting to get more of a sense of what's going on. But again, she has a long way to go before she has like the correct information and is on the right path of things. And I think this is yet another just example of, again, just how behind she's really been. But again, the fact that Tucker actually believed her is just so wild to me. But again, really just speaks to just how just crazily fluid and messy so much of this season has really become. So where to really begin in terms of this week overall? I think the first thing I want to talk about is T-Core as an HOH. There's been so much debate where I've heard people go as far as to say that this was such an amazing HOH reign for T-Core. She had the best HOH reign this season. I was even saying that at first when it seemed like Angela was going to go or MJ was going to go. I thought that this was such a good HOH reign for T-Core. She was solidifying, alliances with, Rubina and Kimo, that they wanted to bring in, like, Chelsie and Quinn and maybe solidify this group together. It seemed like that was something that was going to happen. And then Tucker left, and I saw people on Twitter saying that she had one of the worst HOHs of all time, and I just don't really buy into that, because for me, in order for you to have such a disastrous HOH, you need to leave the week with people not only losing an ally of yours, but leaving the week in a way where people are just really pissed at you. You start off the week really great with people being so excited that you won, and then you end the week with everyone just having such vitriol towards you and wanting you to be the next target, and that's just not the case for T-Core. Yes, this has really hurt like Kimo and Rubina's games, and I really do think that the two of them are in imminent danger. Not to go too far off what's happened already this week, but I really don't think things are going to work out well for them, specifically for Kimo, who really is taking a lot of heat, and I think it's because just how much he hasn't really done a good job of maintaining his social game and not able to deflect things in the way that T-Core is. And then with Rubina, her being so attached to Tucker, I think she has completely now overlooked the fact that she still now has to worry about being in a known trio with Kimo and T-Core that are really starting to pick up steam, especially now that T-Core was HOH. So yeah, I don't think that T-Core herself, just regardless of all of that, had a bad HOH this week. I think, yes, sending out Tucker maybe wasn't the greatest thing for her. She kind of wanted Tucker to go out. She even said as much, like, if Tucker goes, she's not really going to bat an eye. But I don't think she realized how loyal Tucker really was. I mean, he even has said in interviews, like, after the season, like, he was going to stay loyal at least till Final Five. He was going to, try to ride things out with her and Kimo and Angela and Rubina and Joseph. Like, that's really where he wanted things to go. I think despite that, I still think that T-Core is in an all right position. There are still people that want to include her in things. There are still people who feel pretty good with her. She hasn't really pissed too many people off. Yes, you have someone like Chelsie, who I think will turn on her the second that she can. Same with like a Cam, same with like, an MJ. But someone like Quinn does not seem to be overly annoyed by her. He still wants to work with her despite the fact that he just voted against her. So I honestly think that T-Core is going to be okay. And I do think that, again, even though things maybe didn't go exactly how they should have this week for her, I don't think in the long run this is going to hurt her in the way that it does. Now, if Kimo and Rubina go, absolutely that's going to be a problem for her. But I do think that T-Core could adapt if she wanted to. I think that she is a good enough player to where she can recognize her position. She just needs to start looking at the game aside from Kimo and Rubina, and I think that she has a much better path to the end as a result, but we'll have to see how that really does go. But I think the big thing to really discuss here is how much of a turning point this really is for the season. Because look, anytime you lose such a huge player like Tucker, who was making so many flashy moves, who was just such a entertaining and just really lovable presence throughout the entire season, you always looked forward to seeing what he was going to do. You always enjoyed how exciting he kept things. Yes, it's going to be a loss. And yes, it's going to make things go in it's going to feel like the season is headed in a different direction. But in a season where things are so non-committal and things are so ever-changing to the point where, again, I want to reiterate, I said Joseph was the best player last week, and this week I feel like he's one of the worst in the house right now just because of just how naive and delusional he's become. I feel like that's not necessarily a bad thing that things are heading in this, different type of direction. Now, yes, maybe it's not going to be as exciting as things were, but I really do have a lot of hope for this season. I don't think this is going to turn out like a Big Brother 25 where we lose Izzy and then we have this double where it seemed like, there's going to be this momentum and things are going to pick up and then something's going to happen that completely doles out the week. I don't think that's going to be the case with this season. I think this is just such a messy group of house guests, and I think that there's so many people who are playing just terrible games that are just making the most baffling decisions that I just don't see it heading in that direction. And maybe I could be wrong about that. I do think the one constant I can give you, the one thing I think for sure, is that I think Chelsie is going to remain in the best position at this point. I think that it is almost impossible for her to end up in a negative spot at this point. I think even though people know the game that she's playing, she has this ability to adapt. She understands the game that's going on around her. She now has MJ, who she really has done a lot of great work with on keeping on her side. She has Cam. She has Quinn even now who wants to work with her. I think she for sure is in the best spot, and I think she's going to remain in the best spot. But everybody else around her, I feel like my opinion could change on them in a dime. All it takes is for them to make one really stupid decision, and I think the entire season changes in that way. Because of the fact that, again, there is nothing solidified. There is nothing that is stuck beyond a couple weeks. I don't think we're headed in a negative direction. I feel like there are still good things on the horizon for this season. I still feel very hopeful about this season. And I think we really are just kind of overlooking what we just got in the past 2 weeks. That alone, to me, is a testament that things are going to be okay in this season. The fact that we just had 2 straight weeks of this alliance seeming like they were going to be a legitimate thing. The Collective and the Pentagon seemed like they were starting to pick up steam. They were going to end up in this dominant position. They were going to run the season. I had someone on Twitter telling me that they were going to run the entire thing and the game was going to get so boring. But then Cedric left, and well, look at that. They're not nearly in as good of a position as they were at that point. And then it seemed like 6th Avenue was going to start to be a thing, and they were going to start running the game, and they were going to start, being the constant of the season, and things were going to start dulling out as a result. And then only for this week to come around, and the main leader of 6th Avenue ends up going out, and that alliance is completely imploded, and now it's a fresh start. And so the fact that, and not only that, but the very people who were blindsided the past 2 weeks ago were the ones behind that flip. That is just so unprecedented in terms of Big Brother. We don't normally get to see this, especially, let alone 2 different blindsides happening only 2 weeks apart of each other. That is just such a gift. And I think that we just really need to, be excited about that. I think we really just need to take advantage of the fact that this is something that we don't normally get to see, and as a result, I don't think we can compare it to other seasons where a major shift has happened and things get really boring afterwards. And again, the season could absolutely go in that direction. I'm not ruling out the possibility of that happening, but I'm also not going to be one of those people who sit here and say, well, Tucker's gone, so I'm going to check out of the season, because that's not the only thing that's kept this season exciting. There's still plenty of people in this game that have kept the game exciting. There's still the AI arena, which just, again, just completely changes up the week drastically. All it takes is for the wrong person to win and the entire week ends up shifting. That alone makes the week feel so unpredictable. That alone makes things feel so fresh and different and makes it so we really can't predict what is going to happen. You have, things like, for example, Alliance members just ratting out everything to other people. So it just isn't the same type of season that we've typically seen. And as a result, again, I really can't sit here and say that I am feeling like things are heading in a negative direction, that I'm worried about how things are going to go. Yes, maybe this week will not be the most exciting, but I would contend that last week was not the most exciting. Yes, obviously we had Tucker out the collective in the Pentagon, but they were already kind of, losing at that point. And I think Brooklyn certainly made things exciting, but if that wasn't the case, I think last week would have been one of the more unexciting weeks of the game. So, yeah, I really do feel like things are heading in a good direction for this season. I don't feel myself souring on this season in the way that I immediately did in Big Brother 25 when Zombie Week happened. Unless something similar happens. But I really don't think that's going to be the case. Everyone who's been evicted is now home. There hasn't been like a buyback or anything like that. Julie did say that Ainsley is going to announce something. I think it's probably just going to be the end of the AI arena and we're just going to head to jury and things are going to go back to how it normally is, because what else can you do at this point? We're going to be down to single digits next week, and I feel like there's only so long you can let this twist go on for. It doesn't really make sense to continue it into Final 9, and if Ainsley is going to make this announcement, I feel like it probably is just, AI Arena's over, we're just going to get back to how normal Big Brother and things like that, and I really do feel like that's probably what's going to happen. And if that's the case, I'm really not complaining, because I feel like eventually, you do kind of have to get back to the way things are, and I think, yes, once things are back to how we usually as a Big Brother, maybe it'll become a bit more simplified, but I still think it's going to remain very exciting, because you're still going to have players like Joseph think that they are in the best spot, when in reality, everybody that's not like Leah or, say, Tucker, who's now out of the game, or Quinn, wants him out of the game. You're still going to have a player like, say, Leah and MJ, who are so far behind on the information and aren't able to keep up with everybody as a result. You're still going to have someone like Angela, this huge personality who 1 second seems like she's in this really chill spot and she's doing okay, but then her paranoia starts to run rampant and she starts to just be pushed over the edge, and the entire week is, in shambles as a result. You still have someone like, say, Baham, who is really starting to rev up his gameplay and really could start becoming a legitimate threat and could go in really any direction. So there's so many avenues that this season could really take. I just can't sit here and say that I feel bored. I just can't sit here and say that I don't feel like things are going to be interesting from this point forward, because there's just so many more possibilities of where things can go. Yes, like I said, it sucks to see Tucker go. I really was hoping that we'd at least get to see him until jury, but unfortunately that's not the case, and he is evicted. He does get to go home to Ziggy, so there's that. He did talk about how much he missed his dog, so, he gets to reunite with his dog and things like that. And he got $28,000, so, kind of the best scenario in that way. If he's going to be evicted, at least he gets some modicum of money, so there's that. He gets some sort of currency, and it's a pretty big currency at that, so, that's pretty exciting. But regardless, I still really do feel good about where the season is headed. I'm really just enjoying the way things are playing out and just how dynamic the gameplay is this season. I don't feel like we have had this level of electric and passionate gameplay in just such a long time, where I generally do feel like for 4 straight weeks in a row, I have not known who is going to go home. I did not expect things to go in the direction that they did. and then, you know, it completely turned around, and it ended up going in just such a exciting direction that just really ended up improving the season as a result. So we'll really have to see how things play out at this point. It's really up in the air when it comes to how everything's going to happen. Like I said, I think the only thing I can definitively say is I do think that Chelsie is going to remain probably the best player in this game. The way that she's been able to crawl out of the hole that she was in just a week ago. Again, so impressive to me. I don't know how she was able to do that, and I really do feel like things are going to be better for her. The other person I do want to highlight is MJ, not so much based on how she's playing, but the fact that I think now people are going to see her as a legitimate, like, asset, where it's like, we're not going to put her on the block because we know that she's just going to win as long as the AI arena is a thing. And so they're going to try to get her on their side because she always has voted the way that they've wanted her to. She has flipped when she needed to, and I feel like that's where things are headed with her as a result. So she definitely could be one to watch out for. But other than that, guys, that's really it for my thoughts on this week of Big Brother 26. Let me know what you guys thought overall. Love to your thoughts in it. Like I said, there's so much to really speculate over. I feel like this game is so much more open now. I truly have no idea what direction things are headed in, and I'm really interested to see how things are going to go. And even though Chelsea's like in a great position, like that could be exposed. That could happen to her. Again, everyone knows of the game she is playing. All it takes is for the wrong person to win HOH, and Chelsie could be headed out the door, you know, if things end up going sideways for her. But I really just don't see it at this point, but we will just have to see. But other than that, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys saw this week overall. Left your thoughts on it. What do you think of this season? Like I said, I am just really loving all the different directions the season is going, how much things are shifting. It's just happening in a way that we don't normally get to see in Big Brother, let alone modern Big Brother. Just really exciting how things are panning out. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye. Don't worry about your laundry.